Hello and welcome to the Yale SOM online LGBTQ panel. We are very excited to hang out with you this lunchtime, and we have some things that we want to share, and we're also really excited to hear your questions. Please use the Q&A function. We'll be taking live questions as we go. And let's start out with introducing ourselves, and let's begin with you, Billy, and I'll introduce myself at the end. The webinar is going to be from 12 until 1, so please hang out with us as long as you can.
Sure. Thanks, Zoe. So hi, everyone. I'm Billy Marks. I am a second year here at SOM. Prior to the School of Management, I worked in New York, where I worked for JP Morgan and in compliance. Here at SOM, I've largely been involved in the design and innovation community, being involved in the Yale Entrepreneurial Institute last year, the Design and Innovation Club, and now I co-lead Greenlight, which is a innovation workshop focused on sustainability and environmental issues that's run jointly with the School of Forestry. I am also the second year club leader for Out of Office, the LGBTQ club affinity group here on campus, and I was also an orientation leader, which was so much fun. For my summer internship, I worked for an ethical fashion startup in Guatemala called Adelante Shoe Company. And after school, I'm still looking, but I'm interested in the intersection of human-centered design and economic development. I identify as an out queer male, and I use the pronouns he, him, and his.
Thank you.
Great. My name is Catherine Cole. I'm a first year, originally from Maine. Before SOM, I spent 2 years in education and 4 years in nonprofit consulting in New York City. For my internship, I will be with an innovation and growth strategy consulting firm in Boston. I also recruited for management consulting and human capital consulting. Here on campus, I'm also involved with Out of Office. I'll be one of the second year leaders next year, along with the Design and Innovation Club and the Consulting Club, and I will also be an orientation leader, so hoping to see some of you in August. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I identify as a queer woman.
Hi, my name is Mariah Minigan. I am also a first-year MBA student. I am within the SOM community, do a couple different things. One of them is that I am the Equity and Inclusion Chair for first years. I'm running to do that again next year, and what that means is that I work with student government to put on various events that surround inclusion in our community. I'm also a nonprofit board fellow, and I work with an organization called Fellowship Place in the New Haven community. I, before SOM, worked at Vox Media, which was a company based in DC and New York that did kind of the intersection of media and technology, and I did diversity and inclusion work there. Over the summer, I'll be with Democracy Works, which is an organization in Brooklyn that uses technology to make voting more possible. And I'm hoping after SOM to work at kind of the intersection of politics and technology. I use she, her, and hers as my pronouns and identify as a queer woman or a lesbian or a gay, kind of depending on my feelings at that moment.
Nice. Hi, my name is Lucas Silva. I'm from Brazil. Before SOM, I was an aerospace engineer there. And now for the summer, I'll be back in Brazil as a marketing consultant for a company that's going through a merger, and they will now become like the biggest in the world. So it's very exciting. Here at SOM, I'm incoming co-leader Out of Office. I'm one of the co-leaders of General Management Club as well. I use the pronouns he, him, his, and I am an out queer male as well.
Thank you. My name is Zoe Chance. I'm an assistant professor of marketing, and the course that I teach here is an elective called Mastering Influence and Persuasion, and I would love it if you would come and take this class with me. I identify as bisexual. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And do we have any questions yet? I think we're waiting on questions, so that's up to you guys. Send us some questions. We would love to hear them. But I've got some questions for the panelists, and let's just begin with I'd love to hear, maybe starting with you, Lucas, what drew you to SOM?
Well, first, and this will sound kind of techy or something, but I think the first thing is the diversity here. And I honestly mean that. When I came to SOM for the welcome weekend, I got to talk with people from like very diverse backgrounds, and it was very, very exciting. For example, when I visited other business schools, I used to talk to people and they were all like, oh, I'm from consulting, I'm from consulting, I'm from consulting. And here people are like, oh, I used to, I don't know, help orphans in the war or something. And so, yeah, it was very exciting to meet people from very, very diverse backgrounds. And being an aerospace engineer, I think it, I don't know, yeah, it was very, very nice.
Thank you. Let's go.
Yeah. I chose SOM because when I was looking at business schools, I was really focused on the society aspect of SOM's business and society focus. And I thought that SOM did uniquely well in terms of providing opportunities for people to really engage with the world around them in their classwork, also in extracurriculars. The nonprofit board fellows program that I do is a great example of that. I also was talking to actually Lucas's roommate about during Welcome Weekend here about what drew her to SOM, and she was talking about the fact that when she went to other business schools, she would ask people who did social impact, that kind of nonprofit type of space stuff. And they would always point her to, oh, you should talk to so-and-so, they do that stuff, they're really great at it. And when she came to SOM, she would ask around about that, and people would say like, oh, I do that, or like, oh, we kind of all do that. And that was a big change for her, and that was sort of what made the difference for me.
Great. I think for me, I would echo both of those points. And then also, I think from a professional standpoint, there's kind of a bar that a business school has to hit in being strong in the industry that you're looking to move into. And SOM did that for me since I was interested in consulting. And I think once it clears that bar, it's really a question of fit. And I think SOM has the reputation of being the nice business school. And I think that's important not only because you want to choose a school where you'll be happy for 2 years, but that also really plays out in the classroom and in a professional setting. So for example, in our classes, it's totally fine to ask a question that shows that you don't know something. Your peers are perfectly happy to tutor you and on their own time. And then from a professional standpoint, people are really willing to share contacts, support you in your recruiting in a way that's kind of collaborative rather than competitive. So being at the nice business school is not only a great thing for just being happy, but it also really helps in the academic and professional senses as well.
Yeah, for me, I mean, Lucas, I was blown away by also the diversity when I was here for Welcome Weekend. I mean, I wanted to be at a really global place, and that was SOM for me, but also a lot of it was really like the access to the diversity of Yale in specific. I don't tell admissions. I really came to Yale to kind of explore professionally and kind of, they don't tell you to, like, they just tell you to have an idea, which you should, but like I also came to explore a little bit and kind of figure out what I really wanted to do from a skill set perspective as well as content. And so I've been really, I've been taking advantage of that aspect of Yale SOM's curriculum. Took a class on meditation and mindfulness at the college last year, and then this year I've spent 5 of my classes at the School of Forestry focusing on sustainability, environmental conservation, and entrepreneurship. And so now that's a field that I really want to go to, and I feel really prepared to do that. And I think with any cross or interdisciplinary kind of department, you're able to really get that value at Yale, and I think that's a really big benefit that I've seen by being here for 2 years.
Thank you. Can we just follow up on that really quickly? I'm just curious about the rest of you. Have you ended up shifting your career goals at all while you've been here? Or have you, like, you knew what you wanted to do? Because like you said, like, this is the narrative, right? This is the admissions narrative. And as a professor, so many of my students end up exploring a lot. Knew what you wanted to do?
Well, I can start, I think. I came to SOM trying to, I don't know, make a big shift in my career. I didn't know like where exactly I wanted to go, but I feel that I did that in in an industry or in a function that were like very, very different from what I like initially thought. So yeah, I did change my mind from like, I don't know, strategy to marketing. So yeah, it was very, very interesting.
Yeah, I think as I learned more about the strictly business side of things as opposed to like the nonprofit social justice-y side of things, it became clearer for me that I didn't want to, I thought I was going to spend like a couple years in tech, in a for-profit, and it became clear to me that I definitely wanted to go right back into nonprofits after having done that a couple years before SOM. And so I think it didn't change completely, but I focused more once I got here.
Thank you. Catherine, can we hear what is out of office?
Sure. So Out of Office is SOM's LGBTQ and Allies group, our club. So Out of Office has a few different areas that we focus on. So I think first and foremost, it's really important to us to build community among the student population here. So that's both within people who identify as queer and then also bringing in our allies. I think second, we do a fair amount of education and advocacy work. So just a couple weeks ago, Mariah organized with Out of Office an inclusive manager training program that was really well attended and offered some great kind of tactical tips on how to be an inclusive manager, particularly for the trans community. So I think those are some two key things that Out of Office does. We also work really closely with clubs at the other schools at Yale. So every school at Yale has their own version of a punny name. So we're Out of Office, for example. The forestry school is Out in the Woods. The law school is Outlaws, and so on. And we build close relationships across schools. Anything to add, Billy?
Yeah, no, I think my favorite thing about Out of Office is our group me. We have a, like I think all of us are on it, yeah, right? There's a group of like maybe 40 to 50 students that have opted into an app that we use to all kind of share gifts or like stories about things. So it's everything from ranging of like, hey, this thing came out in Australia regarding a new, law, like let's talk about it, to like, oh, like we're all gonna go to the Queer Resource Center on Thursday. Lucas is really great with this actually. You always invite people to the Queer Resources Center for RuPaul's Drag Race on Thursdays. So
What is that?
RuPaul's Drag Race, it's, oh God, how do I describe RuPaul?
I know RuPaul.
Okay, RuPaul, so Drag Race is a reality TV show.
Oh, just watching it.
Yeah,
I
watching
thought-
it, yeah. So, and it's fun to watch with people, and so that's another example of like the type of community building that we have is more of the informal community building with kind of the queer community here on campus, and as Catherine was saying, with some of the other student groups. And so I think that's a big portion of like what we spend our time as leaders doing, is crafting those events to create community within the queer community as well as within our allies, and we do that through a variety of means, and it makes it feel really kind of close-knit, like we're all friends, we all hang out, and
And we do a lot of fun stuff, right? We do like retreats, parties, events.
What's a retreat that you guys have done?
It was in the fall, right? We went to, where did you do?
we rented an Airbnb, and well, this was early on in the fall. We rented like a large Airbnb in the Connecticut area, and we did some just like community building. I mean, when you think about where people are coming from SOM, before SOM, you have so many international students, you have folks that are from all around the country as well, and they all have, as queer identified, they have different stories and different experiences being out or not being out or with their families, and so that type of diversity traverses outside of the community as well. But when we had our retreat, I think part of it was to say, hey, we all have different perspectives, but we all have something in common about ourselves. And so it was meant to just both share stories, but also just get to know each other in a relaxed setting that's away from the school and from New Haven, and kind of set the year out in a relaxed and enjoyable way.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And we're getting questions. Thanks, you guys. One of the questions, and you're already answering some of the questions, one is, how has your involvement with Out of Office, and let's just expand that to how has your being out in the community here affected your recruiting experiences positively or negatively? Have any of you had, like, can you tell?
Sure, I'm happy to talk about that a little bit. So for consulting in particular, I think many of the major firms have specific paths that you can use and connections that you can make with the company through their own LGBTQ affinity groups. So it's a great way to build really authentic connections with different companies. Also in October, it's usually October, there's a big conference called RAMBA, Reaching Out MBA, which I believe next year is going to be in Minnesota. And at this conference, there's a job fair, and it's a great way to connect with potential employers. I know there are some folks who feel less comfortable being out in the recruiting process. For me, I felt like it was really helpful and helped me build connections with companies and helped me kind of assess their cultures. But I think different people handle that different ways at SOM.
Yeah, I think adding on to that, Catherine, I found a lot of value in how close-knit the alumni community is generally, and I found that there are some out alumni at in different firms or different companies, and that's just been a nice, really kind of easy entree into a company, is to say, hey, you're an out of office alumni, you're currently out in the workplace, like I'm not sure if that's something I'm comfortable doing. And I've talked to a few of my classmates about this too, that said, hey, I'm recruiting for this firm, I don't know if I want to be out. But then they talked to an SOM alumni in that company and they were like, oh wow, there's value in being out, or maybe there isn't, but it's at least a nice first contact at a company to kind of gauge the vibe in a way that's not overly kind of formal or kind of concerned that you're going to share too much about yourself in specific ways. So I think it's really up to the person, but I found people have really enjoyed it, particularly when engaging with alumni from SOM.
Yeah. And personally, when I was recruiting for companies in Brazil we don't talk a lot about diversity in the work setting yet. We're just starting to talk about it. So for one of my interviews, I asked them like directly, what is your diversity policy? And they loved that question. And they were very excited about it because they were really trying to build something within the company. And now I'm kind of like responsible for doing this. So yeah, it was pretty cool. And it opened a lot of doors. And especially I think if you talk to the HR people about diversity, they will really like it. And they will be really excited about like your involvement with it.
Very cool. We have another question. What is LGBTQ life like in New Haven? Do you go outside, off campus, out of East Rock, or even in East Rock?
Yeah, so I would say, obviously, especially for us as students, I think LGBTQ life here is kind of defined by the university. I think Yale is still kind of considered the gay Ivy.
It is.
Yeah, so I think there's a really active community in that way. There are also specific events at different venues downtown. So there are different ways to connect with the community at events, at more informal things. We hosted a brunch with Out of Office and Outlaws, the law student group. So I think there are kind of different ways to get involved and meet people outside of SOM, particularly through the other university groups.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the nightlife is actually surprisingly, it is surprisingly active. I mean, New Haven is kind of small. I mean, it's no New York, it's no Boston, but it's easily accessible to both of those cities, which is really nice because I came from New York. I still have friends that are in the queer community there, and it's nice to if I really need to go and I don't know, want to go on a date or get out of New Haven, super accessible. But there's, as Catherine was saying, there's a gay bar that's been around forever and that has an outdoor patio that's really nice. There's a club that is pretty active that we've hosted events at, that other schools will also host events at. I mean, New Haven itself, I think in Connecticut is an LGBTQ haven for just Connecticut residents. And so with Quinnipiac nearby and other universities, I would say that of the spaces, New Haven's pretty active in terms of just if you want to meet people, if you're looking to date, or if you're trying to go out. And New Haven has its own pride and its own kind of queer center that's independent of Yale itself. And so it does feel nice that you don't, while SOM is a smaller community, there is many concentric circles that you can kind of access within the queer community. And happy to speak to more specific questions you might have about dating or whatever that might be, but hopefully that gives a little ground basis for...
I'm sure we'll get questions about that. We have a question from Taylor who wants to know, how did you approach your queer identity in the admissions process, and was it something that you highlighted?
Yeah, I can talk about that. So I have various marginalized identities, and I wanted to talk about all of them in the admissions process, so I made sure to do that. The specific way that I talked about it was in the context of the things that matter to me, and the things that matter to me are my communities. My communities are marginalized communities, and it just so happens that even before I came out, many of the people in my life happened to be queer, and I was building a queer community for a long time. And so talking about the things that matter to me means talking about supporting that community. And so I wrote explicitly about that in my admissions essays and stuff like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I'd also just tack onto that. I mean, you don't have to, right? I know many people that just kind of check the box. I think there is a way that you can notify admissions that you are in some ways LGBTQ and not talk about it. Like, I think that like you don't have to be someone who was like, as Lucas was talking about, like rearranging your diversity policies at work. Like, I think that like if it's a part of who you are and it's a part of your identity in a strong way, like share a story that is representative of a value that you hold or an accomplishment that you had. I mean, I was on the career affinity group at my prior work, and I had done a lot of advocacy work, and so that was a large component of like what I wanted to showcase to admissions about my abilities. But I also know folks that like identify and are part of our community that didn't even check the box. And I think it really is up to you to share with admissions how you want to be seen as a person. And I don't think that either way it's gonna be a year deficit. So I just would encourage folks not to feel that they have to.
Yeah, thank you.
And like an additional thing would be like out of office really helped me during like the whole admissions process. I talked to like several members of the club. They were very helpful.
I think we spoke. Did we speak?
Yeah, we spoke. Oh, yeah. We spoke. Yeah, it was great. When I came here for the first time, I was hosted by one of the members of the club. So yeah, it's really helpful during the whole admissions process.
We're happy to do that too. I think that we'll provide our emails later, and we're all happy to be resources for you all as you think about that.
That's really nice. We're getting some questions about connections between the queer community here or out of office and executives or companies or other LGBTQ organizations in the workplace, like Start Out or Out in Tech. And are there executives in the queer community that are specifically brought to campus to speak?
Let's see, we did have someone speak. It was an event, I think, co-sponsored by Out of Office and WIM.
Women in Management, right?
Yes, thank you. So we do have some speakers. I think generally it's kind of done on a more individual basis with you and the company that you're, perhaps interested in, but definitely something that we could explore doing more of.
Yeah. And the other thing I think would be, Yale is a huge university. You can find probably like queer alumni spread across like several industries. I talked to several of them while I was recruiting, and it's a very valuable resource, and they were very helpful.
Right. And I think other schools and other places at the university will bring in speakers as well. So it's not just SOM, but it's broader in terms of like, the medical school, the law school. So there are different people coming in and speaking all the time, not just at SOM, which is really exciting.
And just tacking onto that, like if you have a vision to do something at Yale, there is a method for you to do that. An example being, this is kind of a random thing, but I am the co-founder of the Yale Business of Legal Cannabis Conference that happened here. My co-founder and I wanted to start having a conversation about the intersection of cannabis, racial equity, social justice, environmental issues, and we decided to put together a conference and get a proposal.
And this was a huge conference.
Yeah.
This was a huge deal at the school.
We had 300 attendees. Similarly, my colleague Yenny, she started Period Con, which was all about menstruation and women's health. So these are two innovative conferences that happened this year. So if you are interested in kind of building the connections between technology, startup life, venture capital, and queerness, like, you have the power to do that. And I think that's really great about being a small community and like having a lot of agency here. And I think I hope that my conference is just a representation of like that if you have a vision, you really can bring it to light.
Yeah, it's great. And the more contact you personally have with somebody that you want to bring to campus, then this is creating a relationship for you as well. I have lots of students bringing speakers to campus who are someone from any industry or role that they're excited about. Which is pretty awesome. All right. Another question that we have is if anything that we haven't talked about already, well, the question is about what resources and support there are for queer students on campus, and we've talked about a lot of great stuff. So I just want to ask specifically, what resources do we have for somebody who's having a hard time? Or you're like, life is great, we have no idea.
Yeah. Do you want to start? I can start.
Go ahead, Lucas.
Well, first we have this Office of LGBTQ Resources here at Yale. People call it HQ. And it's a great center for everything that you might need. It's a great center for like meeting new people or for looking for help, if you need like any I don't know, mental support, mental counseling. It's a great center for that. Also, if you need like hormonal therapy, or if you need counseling going through sex reassignment surgery, there are resources for you at Yale as well. There are resources to deal with like sexual assault, for example. So yeah, there's a lot of things here for you if you're going through like a challenging time. So yeah, it's very...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, so Maria Trempler, who is the head of the Career Resource Center, or HQ, is amazing. I mean, she is someone who is a trained counselor, and I don't really know her entire background, but for example, she's someone who's we've brought in not because of the career community, but because of there have been like tensions within the community. We've brought her in to help dialogue between parties where there might have been a miscommunication related to some type of like racial conflict or something that might have existed on campus. But she's also someone who like is trained, and so Mariah brought her in for that training that Catherine and Mariah were talking about, to kind of lead a facilitated workshop. And so again, there's both kind of reactive resources, I think, on campus through the Career Resource Center, which is huge, or just kind of proactive and saying, hey, I want to like bring in some like someone who's smart, whose job is to talk about these issues. And so I found it to be really great to kind of partner with them really specifically.
Yeah, thank you. We have another question. One of our viewers notes everybody on the panel is out, which obviously we couldn't have recruited a panel with closeted individuals. But wanting to know what is it like potentially for someone coming to SOM, identifying personally as queer but not out in a professional context yet? Have you had those conversations with some of your classmates and other people?
Yeah, so I think I've had a few conversations with classmates, and I think that can kind of take different forms, and there are different, reasons and everything, legitimate, of course, for people being out at differently out, I guess, at SOM. I think that the people who aren't out but want to be out, I would hope, I think over time we see that people kind of get excited about the community that we have through Out of Office. They see allyship, really active allyship, which makes them feel like this is a comfortable place where, they can kind of live their truth that way. For people who kind of don't want to make it a part of their life, that's totally okay too. So I've talked to classmates who say, it's not really something that I talk about a lot or that I focus a lot. I'm here for professional reasons. That's not a big part of my life. And of course, that's okay too. And I think what's nice about Out of Office is that we kind of can provide community at different levels, whether that's individual and person to person. And so people know they can come to us and talk to us as individuals without necessarily needing to, wave the rainbow flag at every opportunity and kind of become a leader in the community that way, if that helps.
Yeah, I think I'd add two points, one tactical and one community. So all of our listservs are anonymous, and so no one can see who's on the Out of Office email listserv, and so you can get information about the club, learn about kind of what's happening without other people knowing that you're on the list. As I mentioned, the kind of group me that we have, that's an opt-in option, and we only have individuals that identify and no allies on it. And we're trying to be very specific about when we're going to a bar or when we're doing an event, whether we're inviting allies or not, so people are aware of the community that we're trying to craft. And so I think we try to be very specific with that. On a more tactical note, I think part of the work that we've done this year, and I think that Catherine, Mariah, and Lucas are aware of, is also just trying to make queerness just more accepted at the school, and I think it is. For example, we had, for National Coming Out Day in October, we, I think I have one on my placard, we have these little rainbow stickers that we have, and we had just everyone where we were just hey, it's National Coming Out Day, we're asking anyone who identifies as queer or an ally or just a friend to wear one. And so in that space, we tried to make people feel comfortable sharing that part of their identity without fully owning it in the space. And it was really cool. There were we gave away 350 rainbow stickers, and you were walking around in October and you saw all of these stickers, and it was right before Ramba, and so I think it got people really excited. And so those are some examples of the way that we try to both build that community while also protecting people's identity.
I think just lastly on that, I think SOM is the kind of place where, in a lot of ways, being queer actually gives you social capital rather than detracting from it. So I think it can be, for people who want to be, like a really exciting place to be out, and people are so eager to be allies and to support you.
Yeah, definitely. And also, like, if you decide to go at Romba, right, go to Romba for like recruiting, you have like several companies just waiting to recruit a LGBTQ person. So, yeah, it's great to be LGBTQ.
That's funny. Catherine and Billy, both of you mentioned allies. Question for any of you. Someone was asking, what is the ally culture like here at SOM?
I can answer some of that. I think for me, a thing that I found really wonderful and kind of surprising was I have never like introduced myself to a community as queer, and I've also never had a girlfriend when I was like introducing myself to a new community. And my girlfriend is on campus a lot, and especially during orientation, she was here all the time. And every time I would like introduce her to someone as my girlfriend, they would be, I think it's kind of like bonus excited that I like, have a girlfriend. It's like, oh, that's interesting. And so I think, but in like a really positive and warm way. So I think, to me, ally culture has just been that like level of not even just like acceptance, but deliberately being welcomed with my partner.
Yeah.
I mean, I see that, and I think one thing that I wish, like, I think that there's a really super strong ally community here, but I think it's still, I think anywhere you go in business or in business school, it's still incumbent often on the queer community to kind of like raise our hands and advocate for ourselves in certain instances. So an example being, I'm in this great class called Leadership Lab, where we're talking all about kind of what does it mean to be a leader in the workplace or in your own life. We had a really great conversation about gender in the workplace, particularly around women's communication differences and perceptions of women and men in the workplace. And like, I was the person who had to raise my hand to say, hey friends, let's just remember that like gender is non-binary, and like someone who might identify or like gender express in a certain way also has to deal with like these kind of tensions, maybe in a different light. And so I think it's still incumbent on us as leaders to kind of like raise that to our allies, but they're so receptive. Like I had so many people come after class be like, whoa, I totally forgot about that. Like, can we spend like 10 minutes at coffee talking? And so it's an example of like people are super receptive, but like I think just in general in trends in business, people are not always going to be advocating and like fighting the queer agenda like I think we might ourselves.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. And for wherever you end up going in business school, we hope that it's here. But even if it's here or whatever school you choose, there are also these micro communities in each class that depend a lot on the professor. And I've had a situation where I had a student approaching me a few years ago saying, I'm sure this isn't your intention and you probably don't realize, but you're making some heteronormative comments that are making some of us uncomfortable. And it was really brave of her to do that. And we had a great conversation. I was, of course, totally mortified and realized that it was absolutely true. And she gave me some specific examples, and it changed how I teach and it changed how I speak. But that's just an example of no matter where you are, there's this community in general, and then there are all these individuals that we still do, all of us in all these different ways and different reasons have to advocate for ourselves in our communities and just remind people like me who need reminding sometimes.
That's really great that they felt comfortable like coming up
really
to you,
good.
though, Zoe.
Yeah. And I really admired her a lot. And we ended up, it's scary to approach a professor, at least it was for me, and I think for a lot of people, and give them some critical feedback. And she was very brave and she was very kind and assuming that I had good intentions when we had this conversation, which really, really helped. And she's graduated a few years ago and we're still in touch. We did an independent study together after that and it all worked out really nicely.
Just one additional note to that. I think here in SOM, we are a community very focused on discussing the role of business in society. So it doesn't matter the path you're going to choose for your career. It's either banking or consulting or social impact or whatever. Discussing the impact on society is very much a thing that we do every day. So we are always discussing how minorities, what minorities have to deal with in the workplace. We are also discussing the importance of diversity. So yeah, I think this helps to build a community that's very aware of the importance of minorities. So yeah.
Yeah. Mariah and any of the rest of you who want to jump in, question about partners from Olga is, are there opportunities for partners to be involved, and particularly are queer partners included and feeling comfortable?
Yeah, definitely. So my girlfriend is based in New York, so she doesn't live here in New Haven, as many people's partners do, but there are also a lot of partners in New York or in other cities. And she was here for a lot of orientation. They had at least one orientation event that was specifically focused on partners that she went to, and she actually made a friend there of a person in my learning team. His wife was at that session, and then later she was like, Julia introduced me to somebody, and I was like, how are you making connections before I am? So I think there's definitely been ample opportunity for her to build connections here. I don't know, like y'all who have met her seem to really like her.
That's great.
Yeah, Julia's great. And I think she has been really explicitly welcomed here wherever she's been. At all of our we have small learning teams that we work with. At all of our learning team events, we have like little dinners and parties and things that we do, just the 8 of us or whatever else. Partners are always welcome there, and Julia is always welcome as one of those partners. And so we've developed we've been able to develop closer friendships with other couples and with just other people in my learning team together. So yeah, I bring her to everything when she's here, and it's great.
Thank you. Olga, please bring your partner. We would love to meet them. In following up on minorities, there's a question from Martin. Can you talk about, and who wants to field this, inclusivity around trans identities?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. We as a community don't have any or many out trans folks. And so one thing this was actually something I talked to Anna about this when she reached out to me and was like, do you want to talk about queer things before I came here, which was great. And I asked about that because I think people here tend to be to one end of a gender binary, and that shows up in the way that people behave and dress. And so I wondered about that as somebody who I don't know where I stand on this spectrum, but whatever. But it's something I was thinking about and wanted to know how commonly accepted that is here. And I think it's something that our community hasn't really encountered enough. And for that reason, it's something we try to be proactive about, for example, by doing the training that Catherine mentioned with Out of Office, where Equity and Inclusion, Out of Office, and the Human Capital Club came together to do this training that was really specifically focused on trans and gender nonconforming folks in the workplace and how you as a manager can be supportive of folks, of those identities in the workplace. So we're trying to be proactive about these things. We did a little tiny initiative earlier in the year where we had some definitions printed on coffee sleeves, because there are a lot of folks who come to SOM who have never encountered terms like cisgender before, or even queer before, or trans, and may not know what those words mean. And so we tried to print some definitions on coffee sleeves that go around coffee from our cafe in the building. And that was really well received from all the feedback that I got in terms of getting some people just basic, this is what a definition is, even if you maybe don't encounter a lot of people with this identity who are out in your day-to-day.
And that's a really tough question, Zoe. So I actually had a close friend of mine from life prior to SOM who came to SOM who divulged to me that they were a trans woman, but they were never out at school. They wanted to identify as a woman, and that is, of course, their choice. And something that I had to kind of actually check myself coming into this community when they were already here, and recognize that that was a choice that they were having. I think that was a choice that in their point in life, they had just kind of transitioned fully in kind of being comfortable with who they were, in terms of their outward expression. And so I think it wasn't something they wanted to really rehash at a new community with all these people and be the only person like that of their ilk here. And so I think it's hard with numbers. I think as we were talking, I think it's just SOM is smaller, but I think we are really trying to have this conversation, and really, like, I think it first and foremost starts with gender expression. And there are a few folks here that I think my co-leader of Out of Office, Anna, one of them who definitely has challenges with like the way that she kind of presents herself, and the way that like when she was abroad in India for our international experience, just had kind of trouble with kind of just being in India like that. And like that, having that conversation with the out of office community was really easy, but talking about that with someone who may come from a specific type of background that is in our community is like, I don't understand why that's a challenge, or I don't understand that. And so we're really recognizing that there are tensions of like so many people, again, 50% of my class is international. And like, as Mariah said, don't know what it means to like the difference between gender expression and gender identity. And that's something that we, even within our own community, we struggle with. And so it's definitely a place where I think we have a priority of like, first and foremost, like awareness, and then education, and hopefully with that we'll bring people that feel comfortable identifying or start feeling comfortable more expressing their gender in other ways. And so it's something that I wish, I don't know, there's nothing I could really change, but I think I just want to like raise those points for folks that are thinking about that.
Yeah, and I think building off of that, I think we definitely have things we need to improve here at SOM, but you will definitely be able to find resources in the broader Yale. And this, I don't know, and I think that's very relevant right now because like Yale SOM is very integrated with the rest of the school, with the rest of the university. So yeah, you will definitely find resources. You will definitely meet people who identify as trans. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll add that the I know trans and genderqueer folks outside of SOM at like within the Yale community who have really found space for themselves here. So yeah, just echoing what Lucas says.
It's a pretty gay school.
Yeah.
Like, it's like pretty gay. Yeah.
Jason wants to know, you talked about what nightlife is like in New Haven. Are there opportunities for students to engage with New Haven LGBTQ community? So we talked about some of just the ongoing social events, bars, brunches, clubs, things like this. Are there other specific ways that out of office, or it doesn't have to be out of office, but queer students have these opportunities in the community? And if you feel like we talked about, and if you weren't paying attention, go back and rewind.
No, but I think it's a relevant question, and it's definitely something that people think about like before they move to a new city, right? So yeah, we engage a lot with the other students in Yale. We do a lot of stuff with them. We barely have time to like look for alternatives and to engage with other people. It's a very full schedule that we have, like a social one. So yeah, we definitely engage with like the rest of the city.
Yeah, but we do also, this is a challenge, and I'm going to speak frankly. I mean, Yale is an Ivy League institution in a city that has a history of racial segregation and racial animus in politics, and there is, I think, a problem, or the institution of Yale has a fraught relationship with the broader community, which is often like a working class communities, or particularly of usually representative of underrepresented minorities. And so I think Yale, that is a conversation that happens at SOM, absolutely. And I think that we could be doing more things that the university and SOM does to engage in that kind of relationship specifically. We have the nonprofit board fellows. I think, Mariah, you said you're on that program, and I'd love to hear a little bit about that. But it's usually where students work with nonprofits for either a semester or for a year, working on some type of strategic agenda or a project. And so in the past, we've worked with refugee organizations, LGBTQ organizations. The organizations shift depending on the needs of that year. So that's a perfect example of where folks from SOM are using their skill sets to support nonprofits locally. What Out of Office does specifically, we totally could be doing more work, but we try to stay plugged into what are happening. And so like there's an AIDS walk, there's a New Haven Pride. We try to just circulate that information. As Lucas was mentioning, there's like a cross-grad queers list that also has specific relationships with homeless shelters or youth shelters that do have LGBTQ populations. It's just, there's so much happening. It's really hard to kind of like, and SOM is a time where people are very self-focused. So it's hard, I think, for people to kind of like provide a lot of time outside. But I think like, I've seen mostly where people engage with the outside New Haven communities is through kind of that board fellows I talked about, dating life, and I think also just sometimes volunteering their time occasionally. But it is hard. It's hard to kind of break out of the New Haven bubble, certainly, at least I've found.
And I would just add that I think at a broader level, going to school in New Haven is going to be very different from going to business school in a place like New York or Boston. So as you all consider schools, you know, I think the location obviously has pros and cons. So I think for me, New Haven being a little bit set apart means that this is really a place where people come to build community, and it's very intentional that way. But that means that, you know, unlike being in a larger city, that obviously has its drawbacks as well. So I think just as you think about your business school experience, thinking about the kind of location and city you want to be in will probably play a larger role than you might be thinking today.
Can we hear a little more about what New Haven is like in general? So there's town and gown conflicts, and there are racial and economic disparities that are very real. And there's a history of, I think, even more strife or conflict than there is now, but we're still living with that and dealing with that. And it's this wonderful, vibrant community with lots of amazing people, lots of fantastic things happening, fun things to do, great nonprofits, and lots of opportunities to be engaged. So for someone choosing, like, what kind of town do I want to live in? Like, can we just hear a little more of the New Haven, what is it?
I'll talk, I mean, I'm coming from New York.
That was a big change.
It was a big change, and yeah, it was a big change. Most people and most students live in East Rock, which is more of a really great kind of like neighborhood. There's not as much going on. I was like, oh my God, I need like late night food. I need like a bar nearby, coming from New York. And so I chose to live downtown. But I've been so surprised about all of the things that like are important to me in New Haven, its ability to kind of meet those needs. So everything from, I love being outdoors. I like being able to do yoga. I really enjoy like diversity of food and art. And honestly, there's so many more things that I could be doing and spending my time in enjoying those types of things than I actually have access to. And then specifically, like Yale, there's just, as everyone was saying, there's just so many talks happening and like workshops and really cool speakers coming. I'm like, wish I had more time. And I have this really long bucket list of things in New Haven and in the surrounding community that I don't have access to. So I've actually been really surprised at like my quality of life and how it's almost kind of increased since moving from New York.
I am really enjoying it here more than I thought I would. I came from DC before this, and then my girlfriend is from New York, or came from New York. And in the first like week that she helped me move in here, we were walking around East Rock, because I live in East Rock, and it was just like sun shining, birds singing, trees everywhere, and people on the street just like waved and smiled at us. Like, somebody biked past me and waved. I was like, do I know you? People are very, very friendly, and it might like throw you off a little bit. Especially in the springtime for some reason. But I really enjoyed it. I think getting involved with the community here for me has meant spending time downtown and going to bars and restaurants. There's surprisingly good food. There's like the Yale museums and that kind of thing is really fun. Voting, gotta vote, get that Connecticut voter registration. One of my roommates is a local alder, and so he's really like amped up about getting people involved in local politics. But it is like, if you're spending 2 years here, it's worth getting involved in that community in a real way. And there are lots of opportunities to engage with like local protests and political events and that kind of thing that happens. New Haven is a very politically active community, which was something that I really enjoy.
Yeah, Lucas, were you moving from Brazil?
Oh yeah, I was living in São Paulo before coming to Yale, and it was also it's also very different living here in São Paulo. I don't know, they have like 85 gay clubs or something like that. It's a lot. But I really don't miss it here in Yale, because it's just like a very social experience that we have here. So we are always doing stuff with our friends, with our learning teams, with like the rest of the Yale community. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to do here. Yeah, from this point of view, I have like nothing to complain. Yeah.
Yeah, I always feel like I'm missing something. Like I could be at like 4 different social events, like tonight included. Like
Yeah,
there are
I
so many
know.
things that I'm missing because I'm like spending time with one friend instead of like the 12 others. And yeah.
FOMO is so
Yeah,
real.
so
We could be drinking probably right now, and we chose to be here.
It's real.
A question from Andrew, are there any out-of-office professional trips or political action-driven trips? Field trips? Do we have them?
Let's see. I went with a couple classmates to New York to visit a consulting firm event. So it was a field trip in a sense. And then politically, I know there was a protest early on in the school year that a lot of out-of-office folks were at. So I think as things come up, we use our GroupMe and other ways to bring our community together and to mobilize.
Yep, also professionally, there's Romba we talked about. It's a great opportunity to network, to talk to employers.
And would you say what that acronym is for again, Lucas?
Oh, it's Reaching Out MBA. It's an organization that brings together every business school to talk about diversity and LGBTQ. This past weekend, by the way, I was in a summit organized by Romba with the club leaders of all business schools. It was a very, very nice opportunity to, discuss how it is to be LGBTQ in each business school. And so, yeah, I think this is like another side of that.
Yeah, and being close to kind of Catherine's point, being close to New York and Boston is really great. I mean, we have strong ties with all of the large bulge bracket banks as well as all the big consulting firms. And so all of them host either LGBTQ events on campus when they come to visit, or as Catherine mentioned, like when I was recruiting, I went to like a BCG and Bain event in New York, so that was really great. I know a friend who like really enjoyed connecting with folks at Morgan Stanley when he was recruiting for finance is now going there. So like that's really exciting. In terms of other field trips, there's a lot. We have a cross affinity GroupMe as well. So it's folks from women in management, the Latin American and Latino group, Black Business Association consortium, out of office, and we've all would do when the protest post-Trump happened, folks went down to DC, folks went to New York. So we kind of coordinate with those types of affinity groups that might have equally aligned interests in activism, and we'll kind of coordinate them because oftentimes, as out-of-office people, on a weekend, people might be in or out, so it's like there only might be 3 people that can go. So it's nice that we kind of coordinate with other affinity groups on campus to involve ourselves in those types of activities.
Great, thank you. And thank you to all of you watching now who have been asking questions and actively involved with us today. I thought what we could wrap up with is just each of us sharing one piece of advice. And this could be advice related to the topic of the day or not, maybe related to deciding how to choose a school that works for you. And I want to just share one piece of advice that's related to so many things that have come up, which is wherever you go to school, and we hope it's here, think about whatever it is that you want, figuring out how to make that happen, and also whatever opportunities coming your way to figure out how to personalize them a bit. For example, in my class, we do weekly challenges, and one of the challenges that students complete is called an empathy challenge, where you're calling people and you have 3 conversations with people who fundamentally disagree with you about something you really care about. And your objective is to just develop empathy by understanding what their values are that are driving those beliefs, and you're not trying to influence them at all. And I had 2 different students who, they're both queer and one out, one not out, and they chose to talk to friends and family who were very upset. And one is out with his family, but not out here at school. And those conversations were transformational. And this is just something that happened with a school assignment. So even just something as simple as that, a homework assignment, you could transform it into something that was really going to be meaningful for you and bring any speakers you want, create conferences. There's so many opportunities. We would love to have more trans people here, and we'll probably need more trans people here in order to make some of the changes that we'd like to make with real inclusivity around that. But Anyway, thank you, and let's hear advice from the team. So, Lucas, can we start with you and move down?
Yeah, I think my main advice would be come to the Welcome Weekend. It's a very fun weekend. Actually, before coming here to this Welcome Weekend, I had already decided to go to another business school. And it really worked. They changed it. So yeah, it's a great experience. You meet like tons of very diverse people, people with like very, very different plans for their lives. So yeah, that's one thing I would recommend. And the other thing is, I don't know, if you're not 100% sure of what you're gonna do for the rest of your life, I think Yale is a very, very nice place to explore. People come here and you start talking to each other. People change their minds about things. People come here thinking one thing and they decide to like go to consulting. People come here thinking about going to consulting and they end up in like, I don't know, social impact or something. So yeah, I think one tip would be come to the Welcome Weekend, and one thing of like that Yale has to offer is exactly this ability, this opportunity to explore and figure out what you want.
My advice is similar. I also came to Welcome Weekend and found like the 3 people who I like identified most with and who are still like very close friends of mine here. And it was nice to be able to come and realize that like I could find community in this place. And so I think having an opportunity to meet other students who are thinking about going to the same place, just other people who you might be able to connect with, and then kind of, I think Yale at least counts on you to hold one another accountable to come here, which we kind of did, and then we all came. And so I think finding a place where you can find community. I think also plug for SOM is that we're particularly good at that because we're not in a large city. I think people are in New York, they might have other communities who they spend a lot of time with, and they're not going to just like, you know, disrupt the rest of their life to engage with you necessarily. But here, like I remember one of my first weekends, my learning team we were like, can we all get dinner on Friday night together? And everyone was like, yeah, sure, let's have dinner Friday night, all 8 of us. And like 1 to 8 people who are like socially engaged all have the same Friday night free with no notice in New Haven. And so that I think is something that's been really valuable about being here specifically.
Nice. I would definitely echo the visiting campus piece, and if you can visit even before applying, I think it will help you get a whole new perspective and get really excited about the school. You know, I visited a few different business schools, and SOM immediately felt like home to me. It felt very different, much more diverse, kind of happier place than some of the other schools I visited. So I think just having that firsthand experience rather than what you can see on a website, whether it's SOM or somewhere else that you get really excited about, I think visiting in person is great. The second thing is, you know, if you are starting your MBA in the fall, you know, I think there are great opportunities to explore, but the more you can think about your priorities and what you want to get out of this and how you want to grow as a person and as a professional, that will help you make choices in the fall when there's so much going on and it's hard to figure out where to allocate your time. So as much time that you can spend on the front end thinking about your priorities for business school, that will really pay off when you arrive on campus.
So something that I'm thinking about now as I leave SOM, and I'm really thankful for Sarah Biggerstaff's Leadership Lab class for, is thinking about the components of my best self. And I would encourage you all to think about what, like, who is your best self? When were you your best self? Like, what components and structural, social, academic things existed for you to be your authentic and best self? And show that to admissions, like write that down. And that is who you should show to admissions, because I think people that are here are authentically quirky. Who you're getting right now is who I am all the time. I think you guys can all attest. And I love it. And then when you're here, try to find ways to test those assumptions and those components when you're going to any business school. Like, what are those components and how can I really assess whether or not those things, whether that's having a yoga class or like having access to nature or having really cool cocktail bars or like super interesting, unique, weird, quirky, interdisciplinary kind of academic things are really going to allow you to thrive, and like test those assumptions when you're visiting schools and try to make the choices based on that, because you want to be happy and your best self at school. And I hope that you can come, and I hope that's here, but if it's not, I hope it's somewhere else and you're happy about it.
Thank you so much. Here's to your happiness and being your best self. And we'll all say goodbye and thank you for spending your time with us. Good luck in this process.